today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite and also one of the most foundational practices that I advocate and teach and coach. It is one of the most essential practices in my own life. It was also one of the most transformational for me, and it is the reflection practice. This is something that if you have looked at some of my other videos, you will have noticed that I've done reflection practices like mid-year reflection and reflecting on your goals for the year. And by no means are those not great practices, but they are very specific reflection practices. And I wanted to walk this back a little bit and start super simple, because as with most things, it is the simplest things that can sometimes have the biggest opportunity and impact. So what I mean by a reflection practice is it's very similar to a mindfulness type practice. It's not a meditation, but it is a very engaging inner dialogue that you can have with yourself. You can do this in a number of ways. You can talk it out. You can, if you're an oral processor, you can literally talk to yourself and walk through these steps. Or you can write it down. Or you can sit in a quiet place and just have this inner dialogue with yourself. The whole purpose is that this is something that's so simple, that is so basic, you can do it at any time you have a few moments. And it absolutely is something that you can make your own. So today, 3 steps to this reflection practice. That's it. And if you do find yourself wondering, why should I even think about doing reflection? Why do I need this in my life? I will give you the kind of most basic overview of what I think of as a reflection practice, which is really around internal awareness and alignment with what you're feeling physically, what you're feeling emotionally, your experiences. And it's a very intentional processing of all of those where you make meaningful connections. And these are connections that bring you resolution, closure, next steps, understanding. And yes, some of these are also things that might happen in the back of your mind. If you don't do a reflection process, you might come to a realization at any given point. But this is a very intentional practice, and you start training your mind to think more intentionally about your feelings and your current state of being. And you start making these connections more frequently, even outside of your practice. So I used to do my reflection practice on my walks and in my commutes home. And now both of those times are, even if I'm not doing a reflection practice, I will frequently find myself having an aha moment because I sort of trained my brain to think about this and to process information in this way. And it's become a very helpful part of my life. So without further ado, like I said, 3 steps, basic, you can do this. We're gonna get into it. So for your reflection practice, as I mentioned, you don't have to have anything. You just need some space. I would say probably alone time is the only real requirement. And that's simply because you need to be able to do a bit of processing. This is a mind-body connection, and it's not what I would necessarily say is heavy lifting, but it is definitely going to be needing your full attention, or most of your attention. So with that said, once you have your quiet space, you can choose to do an actual mindfulness type meditation or breathing practice to kick this off if you want. You can. But really, where we start, the first step of this is to tap into sensation. Now, what do I mean by sensation? This is before we get into analyzing, before we get into trying to make those connections, we are simply going to examine how we actually feel in our own bodies. And your body could be your physical body, it could be also your mind, it could be your heart. So you're looking at your full state of being and you're trying to identify sensation. And this is where I think it's helpful because we forget that emotion and thought triggers physical experience. And we experience things in our body that have nothing to do with like a physical happening to us. We might be sweating. It has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It could be the fact that we're anxious or we're nervous or we're stressed out by something instead. Starting with the sensation gives you something to hang on to sink your claws into, So focus on the sensation. Don't focus on the story. Look at tension, any heaviness, if there's restlessness, or even I would say a sense of missing sensation. If you feel like there's an emptiness or a hollowness, just locate that sensation and ask yourself a question. Where does this come from? And from here, you're going to follow the thread. A reflection process is that connecting the dots. You're going to do this. So when I say follow the thread, you're going to see where that connects back to. The sensation is where we start, and then we're going to look at the next step, which is find your truth. Now, we don't always ask ourselves whether what we're feeling is true. This is a real big part of coaching that I do with clients, where I'm challenging people to ask this question pretty regularly. But if you can ask yourself, I identified a situation, a sensation, I followed it back, and now I'm going to look at the truth behind the sensation and what might be causing it or what it's connected to. This is deep work. This is powerful. You're going to ask yourself, what is the cause of this sensation that I'm experiencing or feeling? You can ask yourself, is this actually true? Sometimes what we're feeling is because we're nervous. And you may ask yourself this, and immediately a situation or an experience from your earlier part of the day or last week jumps to the forefront of your mind. When you ask, where does this come from? What is causing this feeling? You're getting to the truth. But sometimes we're not always honest with ourselves. So this does take a bit of practice and asking ourselves, is it actually true? Did what so-and-so said to me earlier, did it really hurt my feelings? Is this sensation I'm experiencing because I'm hurt? Or is this sensation coming from, a feeling of uncertainty now that they've raised in me? You take a closer look. Oftentimes, the story that we're carrying is only part of the truth. And sometimes it's not true at all. So the question creates space. It allows us to examine something that's already happened, that's caused this sensation, and for us to get a little bit more objective, taking that step back and looking at it. Now, the final step in this process is the step where you move toward resolution. You ask yourself, what would help me resolve this or let it go entirely? What would I need to do? There's so many things in the world that are far beyond our control. We cannot influence massive change everywhere we go. It is important to acknowledge what we can control and influence, though, and that is ourselves. That is how we react to things and the actions that we take. So when looking at this final step, you've identified the sensation already, you've connected it to a bigger experience or moment or realization, you've identified the truth of that situation and continue to follow that thread back to the true statement, I am feeling this way because of X, Y, or Z. And then you're going to move to resolve it. And this sometimes can be as simple as saying, I have to let this go. This is something I can't be responsible for. This is something I can't control or influence. Or this is something that I need to take an action on, or else it's going to haunt me for years. So you don't have to focus on fixing everything. Sometimes things are just going to be, but you can control and identify your next step. Do you let it go? Do you make a contact? Do you take an action? You get to decide and identify what it's going to take you to do what's necessary to move forward or to release it altogether. And that's it. Those are your 3 steps. Start with sensation, not stories. Focus on the sensation of what you can tangibly feel in a moment. Connect that to the origin or an experience or a point. Ask yourself what the sensation is coming from. Then you move into find your truth. Identify the truth. And you may even find yourself needing to ask and repeat steps 1 and 2 a couple times to get to the actual root cause. If you realize that this tension you've been building on yourself for days, that you feel like is a physical weight and that is dominating your thoughts as well, is because you have an upcoming deadline. Well, why is that deadline the thing that's causing you this feeling? You have other deadlines. What about this deadline is the really big, crucial thing? You look for the truth. You find out that maybe that deadline is making you feel uncertain because you've got a lot of competition for your job. And then you track that back to another truth, which is you don't feel stable, or you feel like you don't have the support necessary in order to do your job and meet your deadlines. You find it back. You track that thread all the way back to the truth of what's really causing that sensation. And then you ask yourself, is this something that I need to let go of? Is this something I can take a step toward? If this is a complex situation that has probably many steps to it, which is possible, then you focus on, what are the possible outcomes and what would I need to do in order to reach the outcome I'm most comfortable with. It is something that you can make your own. You can do this with one sensation. If you have a day where you look at your calendar and you have an hour of time to sit and just reflect, you can do that too. I recently did this reflection process at like 5 o'clock in the morning when I was on vacation in Hawaii with my family. And before anybody woke up, I went out onto our porch and I just sat and I watched the sunrise and I did this reflection practice. And it is, again, it's a small, humble practice, but the results were huge. And I was able, just sitting in that physical space in a place that I hadn't been for 10 years, I was able to reflect all the way back to the last time I was there and make some observations that I'd been struggling with for a while. The space that you do this in can sometimes influence the practice. The timing can influence the practice. You never know. Which is why I would say, in addition to making this your own, do this practice regularly. Like I mentioned before, I used to do this as part of my commute home because I was trapped in a car for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. I would sit there and I would just process my day. I would reflect back and really try to understand why I had these massive feelings of anxiety and figure out how to navigate forward. So this is something that the more you practice, the better you get. The faster you're able to really dig and start unearthing those questions. And in a way, I think of the reflection practice as you being your own personal coach, because you're asking yourself questions. And those questions have a tendency to bring up answers, even if you're not expecting them. They have a way of uncovering truths that you maybe weren't even ready to admit. So take a pass at this as just a basic, everyday kind of reflection practice and see where it takes you. Give it a shot for a week and see if this is something that starts helping you cope. If you have anxiety, this was my anxiety cure when I was experiencing severe postpartum anxiety years ago. It's just there for you. And I really do think that you give it a shot and you try it out for a little while, it could give you big results in the long run. So I hope you will try this practice. Please comment back if you have any experiences of your own or any questions. And you can certainly check out my website. You can subscribe to my newsletter. I share tips like this practice and other meditations and insights each month with all my subscribers. And absolutely get connected with me if you would like to talk more. Thank you so much, though. I appreciate you tuning in. Till next time.